Man, I want to make a FNaF theory video, but I really have no ideas. Maybe I'm just done making FNaF theories. If only there was someone out there who could take my place, someone who was even better at it. Someone like him. Hello Internet, welcome to Thame Geory, the show that takes 6 months between episodes because we just care that much more. Anyway, a while back now, a good friend of the channel, RyeToast, made a series of videos going over what the FNaF series of books tells us about the rules of the series. Basically, what are FNaF's unique laws of physics regarding things like robots and possessions. That latter part is what we're going to be looking at today, as even now the FNaF series is a little iffy on that. To shorten Rye's video to you, as well as several descriptions from over the years, the way an animatronic or item becomes possessed within the universe of FNaF has two different paths. The first is Remnant. This is the classic stuff. You can call it ghost juice, spirit fluid, or my personal favorite, goo of the dead. Remnant is a material made from two important pieces, a spirit and metal. It also seems like flesh might be involved, but it's not clear if that's a requirement. The books actually specify that it has to be in a liquid state to be considered Remnant, but for our sake we're going to be referring to Remnant as it exists when in its liquid form, or presumably when it hardens inside an animatronic. After all, it's not like the machine stops being possessed when it hardens. The other substance is Agony, and this is both much more straightforward in terms of what it is, but way more vague in its implication. Basically, Agony is the actual emotion, agony. The idea is that agony is the most powerful emotion a human can experience, to a point where it can leave an imprint of that agony on an item which animates it. Basically, if a mirror is present in a room where a mass murder takes place, that mirror will absorb that agony and appear haunted, even though there's no actual spirit involved. However, since agony always comes from a person, there's usually some semblance to that person. A good example is Pit Trap, the antagonist of Into the Pit. Although Pit Trap is not William Afton, he still behaves a lot like him, and even replicates his actions. This is because it is a suit haunted by William Afton's agony. Got it? So Remnant has a spirit attached, and agony does not require a spirit. However, it can definitely be accompanied by one, but it does require pain and suffering. So, with that in mind, how does that help us with the games? Well, to put it simply, it doesn't. Not on its own. With all these robots throughout the series, it's not really clear what is powering what. It's worth noting that in either case, Remnant and Agony are fuel sources. Without them, these animatronics are usually not evil, and are usually not active at night. So let's go through the whole merry lot of them, figure out which fuel each animatronic is running on, and get to the bottom of this mystery. Okay? Okay. Let's start with FNaF 1. FNaF 1 is probably going to be our easiest game for two reasons. The first being that we know for a fact that there are actual spirits in these animatronics, and two, the books confirm that Remnant is made with their endoskeletons, at least in the fourth closet. For this reason, I'm going to have to chalk these four up to Remnant possessions. But Golden Freddy is where things get tricky. A key difference between Remnant possessions and Agony possessions is that Agony possessions seem to be a lot more powerful and supernatural in their abilities. Golden Freddy on his own has always stuck out as one of the most odd and definitely the most spectral, we'll say. For this, I'm gonna have to say that it's both, simply because Golden Freddy makes sense to be fueled by Agony and Remnant. Keep in mind that in UCN, it's strongly implied Golden Freddy is the character keeping the player trapped. Based on what we know, this spirit is angry and in pain. I think it makes sense that this is because of Agony, but we are talking Golden Freddy here, and I think it's usually best to not even think about him. So, let's move on to FNaF 2. FNaF 2 is going to be our first tricky one. This is going to come down to one of the most useless yet hotly debated topics over many years in the FNaF fandom. Are the toy animatronics possessed? The majority answer seems to be yes, however not only is it never stated that kids were stuffed into these robots, it's never even implied. In fact, FNaF 2 goes out of its way to tell us that the Wizards are possessed, but the toys are just so damn irrelevant. That being said, I do think the toys are possessed, and I think I'm going to have to chalk this one up to Remnant. Think about it like this. One of the first things we ever learn about the withered animatronics is that they were being used for parts. This would imply that part of their endos were being taken from them and put into the toys. Do you see where I'm going with this? Although this metal is presumably not melted down into the liquid Remnant seen in the books, we're still seeing haunted metal transfer from one robot into another. I think the simple answer is that the toys are possessed by the same kids who haunt the withered animatronics. This does leave an outlier, though, of Balloon Boy, but I'm not even sure he's possessed. I think he might just be an asshole. However, there is still the matter of the puppet. This one is a lot harder, but I'm actually going to chalk this one up to Agony, as well as Charlotte's actual ghost. It's hard to explain, and this may not even be the last time I say this specific combo, but one of the key details that signify an Agony possession is black blood, sometimes even seen as tears. I would describe these as being similar to the tears on the puppet's mask. But wait, there's more. Since it's never implied that Charlotte got stuffed into the puppet, this further propagates that it was Charlotte's agony that seeped into it and animated it. Another difference between Agony and Remnant seems to be intelligence. Agony beings are usually pretty damn smart and in control, whereas the few times we've seen Remnant, these robots have been violent and aggressive with little control of their own actions. Since we get this line in UCN,
"The others are like animals, but I am very aware."
I'm gonna have to say that Agony is most likely involved with the puppet. The last two characters from FNaF 2 that I want to touch on is Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy. It's not clear what Shadow Freddy is, but Shadow Bonnie it seems we may have an answer for. Shadow Bonnie in FNaF AR is the antagonist of the Remnant collecting minigames. However, he is not made of Remnant himself. Instead, he appears whenever you accidentally pick up too much Dark Remnant, which has been hinted at to being Agony. They fulfill basically the same role as far as we can tell. So Shadow Bonnie is probably the most definitive Agony-based character in FNaF 2. As for Shadow Freddy, I might just have to say Agony as well simply because nothing else would really make sense. He remains one of the most elusive, unknown characters in the game. On to FNaF 3. I decided I'm probably just going to skip over the phantom animatronics since they're most likely just hallucinations and not real. However, if they are in fact real animatronics, then this is definitely a case of Agony. Without going over them, please just trust me on that one. Can you do that for me? I knew you could, sport. Anyway, how about Springtrap? This is where things get very muddy. First up, we know for a fact in the Fazbear Frights books that William Afton does create Agony, but we don't know if he had any agony going through him when he was Springtrap. Presumably, such a harsh death would probably produce a lot of agony, but knowing William, not only was his death probably intentional, but the outcome made him feel stronger than he had before. With all that being said, I'm gonna have to chalk this one up to both Remnant and Agony. Remnant, because William's body is absolutely mangled in that suit, he's definitely possessing that thing the hard way, and Agony because we know William would eventually disperse his agony in the books. I keep saying that line in the books, mind you, because it's still not even confirmed that Agony is a present rule in the games. That said, I believe it is, and that's why I'm using it like this. Things will get more interesting later on, I promise. How about FNaF 4? Well, this is another tricky one because we're not entirely sure what the nightmares are. It seems most recently confirmed that they were hallucinations induced by a gas, but let's assume that this is a red herring. Let's assume that the nightmares aren't hallucinations. They're either fully real or fully dreams. Where do they stand then? Well, in my opinion, the nightmares behave most parallel to Agony monsters. Let's look at Foxy. When Foxy is in the closet, he has several stages, with the first stage being as a little doll. I think this is our dead giveaway that these nightmares exist as haunted dolls, and their appearances are being manipulated. But which of these two substances can manipulate appearances? Agony. For this, we're going to refer to two instances. Once again, Pit Trap, but then also Eleanor, the main antagonist of the Fright series. You can fight me on that statement. Pit Trap in general is described as having a somewhat similar appearance to the nightmares, including his sharp teeth and even a tongue, something Foxy was supposed to have. But either way, Agony allowed the Spring Bonnie suit to appear more organic and have organic features. And although the nightmares are still definitely metallic, I think these warped features are in line with what Agony can do. Then there's Eleanor. Eleanor is a character who changes her appearance regularly using Agony. Since she's pretty much made of the stuff anyway, she changes her appearance from a tall, lanky robot to a young girl pretty easily. In the story she originates from as well, she's able to use a necklace to change a girl's appearance physically, even though at night she's actually butchering her. So I'll have to chalk the real nightmares up to being Agony. But what about nightmares? Well, this is more difficult, but I'll actually have to lean on Remnant in this scenario, if only because unlike Agony, Remnant has been shown to have a lot to do with dreams. In FNaF 2, you can experience dream sequences from the perspective of Freddy in FNaF 1. Since we've established these are Remnant-based characters, for the most part, I think we can attribute dream manipulation to this material. This is seen in the books as well, although to a somewhat lesser degree. While Agony can cause a person's mind to basically go dark, Remnant is actually able to target and enhance specific memories in a person. I think this would describe the nightmares, only they're being used for evil as opposed to good. Well, that was a lot, and for an entry which might not even matter in the long run. How about sister location? Sister location is going to be another easy one since this game seems to be the game Scott first thought up the idea of Remnant for. Or at least he used the next game to clarify the Remnant bullshit in this one. Let's start with Baby. Baby is definitely a Remnant possession, given that seemed to be the express purpose of the fun times. I would also point out Baby definitely is different from the other fun times, but this could just be because she was programmed this way. It's never really clear when it's Baby in control, or when it's the ghost inside of her, Elizabeth. The other fun times are much simpler possessions. Regardless of where you think the Remnant comes from, we can absolutely confirm that the fun times possess a shit ton of it, as their conglomerate form, Molten Freddy in the next game, is directly stated to have a lot of it. As for the Bidybabs, the Mini-Renas, Lolbit, and Yendo, I got nothing. Or at least, these are a lot more difficult to figure out. The Bidybabs give us no indication directly that they are possessed, but in case they are, I'm gonna say they each probably have a shot glass full of Remnant looking stuff in them. The Mini-Renas are harder, but I'm also probably just gonna say Remnant because that's easier. Lolbit may not even be a real fucking animatronic, and Yendo is weird. Let's call him Agony. Why? I don't know. Because he's kind of like Golden Freddy. I'm not entirely convinced William Afton would inject an unfinished endoskeleton with Remnant. I admit I pulled that one entirely out of my ass, but whatever. Let's move on to shit. FNaF 6, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. Let's bang these ones out. Starting with Scrap Baby. I think this is our clearest answer. It seems to just be Baby, but again, so we'll say that this is a Remnant possession. Same with Molten Freddy, since they are directly stated to contain Remnant. Then there's Scraptrap, and honestly, this is where I'm at a crossroads. You see, we did state that Springtrap is likely on Team Remnant and Team Agony, but funny thing about Remnant, it tends to burn up when exposed to heat, which is why the FNAF 6 fire is set in the first place. But we know Springtrap already went through a fire at the end of FNAF 3, so the question becomes this: did the Remnant survive? It's a good question, but I'm actually gonna have to say yes. If only because Henry tried to kill William once again with a fire. I think this implies everyone in the vents in FNAF 6 contains Remnant, with Lefty being the weird one. As I stated, I think the puppet is fueled by Agony, not necessarily Remnant. However, Lefty definitely changes that up a bit, to a noticeable degree even in UCN. In UCN, Lefty does not have the puppet's voice, and instead speaks much more simply about rest and sleep.
Inside with me.
I think that putting the puppet inside Lefty is Henry's way of sort of making the puppet Remnant based. It would be combining a spirit and metal and suppressing them. So I'll say that Lefty is Remnant based and suppressing the puppet. Got that? Well, let's move on because I'm actually getting kind of sick of this. Help Wanted gave us Glitch Trap, and I'm not daring to touch that shit just yet. So let's just move on to Security Breach. This is yet another case where it's not clear if these animatronics even are possessed by Agony or Remnant. But I do have another secret third option. Bisexuality, I mean Glitch Trap virus. Mimic 1, Glitch Trap virus, whatever you want to call it, is the virus that infects the Glamrock animatronics in the Tales from the Pizzaplex novels, which makes them act all crazy and weird. We can chalk most of the Security Breach cast up to having this, but a big question pops up. Is Agony or Remnant present at all in the current story? Well, yes, in a pretty big way. For this, we're going to be graduating from our constant references to the Frights books and the Silver Eyes trilogy to the Tales from the Pizzaplex books. These books tell us in several ways that we are still dealing with some haunted machines, just not as many as we might expect given that's the whole premise of the fucking series. The big one is of course my goat, the Mimic. In the Tales books, it's made pretty clear that the Mimic is possessed by Agony that was output by Edwin after the death of his son. This Agony, combined with the Mimic's programming, essentially caused it to reenact individuals' actions or commands in an extreme manner. For instances, cramming a man into a fridge like a meat pretzel because Edwin used to put food in the fridge. Since Agony specifically is called out here, that's what I think the Mimic is operating on. Then there's the Tangle, or the Blob. We don't know a whole lot about the Blob, but if I'm right about a previous theory regarding what they actually are, then the Blob is a conglomerate of dead human bodies inside a tangle of metal endoskeleton parts. These, I think, would make up the ingredients for a Remnant possession. This even explains why the Blob would want to escape the Mimic, and why the Mimic doesn't seem to have control over it. Unless Agony and Remnant are affiliated with one another in the same body, they actually seem to avoid each other, with Remnant being able to burn Agony. So that's our little rock, paper, scissors triangle. Agony can survive fire, fire beats Remnant, Remnant beats Agony. Somewhere in the mix as well as Flamethrower Endo. That really just leaves us with Burn Trap as the outlier, since it's not clear if he is meant to be the Mimic or a resurrected William Afton. In either case, I'm gonna chalk this one up to Agony as well. since the blob does seem to take them out, and it wouldn't be the first time a spring Bonnie suit has come to life with organic matter fueled by William's agony. And saying that out loud, I realize that if that is what Burn Trap actually is, I might scream. And with that, we've talked about basically every character who has shown signs of possession within the FNaF games. Before you type in the comments that I ignored FNaF AR though, I'll just say that there is a 99% chance it's just more glitch trap fuckery, and leave it at that. But further than that even, you might question characters like Paper Pals, Cupcake, or those weird sister location heads. Honestly, I have no idea. We can honestly just probably chalk this stuff up to ghosts even if they aren't possessing anything. To an extent, pretty much every FNaF character has some kind of ghostly ability, and as proven in multiple instances like the movie or the short story Coming Home, they aren't restricted to just staying inside their animatronics at all times. So we'll just say that these sorts of characters are presently unknown. And with that, I'm gonna have to put a wrap on today's thame geory. Hopefully the next one comes out in less than 6 months. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, be sure to subscribe to the Patreon, and be sure to remember that, hey, it's just a geory, a thame geory. Thanks for watching. I'll miss you, MatPat.